What is
Yeah.
up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we are here with Inge of Gatuplan. It is great to be able to talk with you. Thanks for coming on the show today, man.
Thanks for having me, Alex. Thank you so much. It's a
Any t-
pleasure.
Anytime, man. The pleasure is all mine. It's great to be able to talk with you. This brand new solo album that you have coming out, Välkommen till underjorden. I think I did the best I could there,
Yes.
but
Very good.
thank you, thank you. Now this album is absolutely awesome, and I can't wait for the rest of the world to hear it. But for people who haven't heard the album yet, do you first feel that the first two singles that you released so far are maybe a good representation of what this whole record will sound like, or is that just scratching the surface of what's to come?
I guess it's a pretty good representation. I, the, there's a lot of musical influences in my songs, and I try to sort of be very open in my songwriting uh, when it comes to what I want to do and what I want to express. But um, yeah, I would say they're pretty good, pretty good representations. But I think it's more of an I'm more of an album person than singles person, I suppose, because you know, we're both probably we grew up with albums and the sequencing of songs and the running order and how you know spend a bigger chunk of time with the music than just one song.
Yeah, of
So
course.
yeah.
Of course. I mean, I grew up with iTunes, so I can't say I relate. But I'd imagine when you have to pick the
Oh,
single, yeah, I'm not born in '93, but as somebody who had to grow
you're
up
born
with,
in '93.
yeah, yep. But as I'd imagine picking singles for this album and all that, because that's something every artist has to do now. That probably had to have been rather torturous, right?
Not really. No, you just pick some songs that you think that are very direct and very and like at the same time representing what you're doing, and also that I had to make videos for the singles. Then you want to have something that's easy to visualize or whatever, and also um, I picked the singles in. Like in conversations with my label, and I would like to think that they know what they're doing. So yeah,
Yeah.
uh, I it's a part of it. You know, it's a part of the process of the album is to pick out those songs that maybe can give people who've never heard of you an idea of what you're doing, and the songs that are, you know, and stand some kind of chance of standing out.
Yeah. Um, was there sort of like a preconceived vision of what you wanted this album to be like, or was this like a very experimental songwriting process and not too much forethought went into it?
You know, I was very I had a clear vision, just as I had with the previous album. But I were the first Gatuplan album, Kampen går vidare, which translates to The Struggle Continues, was released in 2021. And this new album, Välkommen till underjorden, which means Welcome to the Underground, um, is probably the album that I wanted to do on the previous album, because I think as a band, as musicians, we have come together a bit more. Everyone is a bit more relaxed and confident in what they're doing, and what we're doing together as a musical collective. Because even though I write the songs, I leave a lot of room for the musicians to contribute with what they do best, you know, with some kind of, you know, certain aspects of arranging and an attitude of playing and technique and all that. So Välkommen till underjorden is the album that I wanted to do when I did the first one.
Mm.
I do think we came together a bit better on this record than we did on the previous one. So it was specific in that aspect that you know, it feels more focused, it feels more together, and it feels more band
Mm.
in the studio. But musically, it's still it is a mix of melodic punk rock, and there's some ska, there's some power pop, uh, and even the title track has a bit of a kind of a Motorhead feel to the
That's what I thought of.
second part of it and all that. So yeah, okay, there you go. And so I I I, I knew what I wanted to do, but it turned out way better than the previous album, even though it's the same um, creative starting point when it comes to influences.
Um, Being such a prolific artist, I mean, between your work with Against Me and the International Noise Conspiracy and the Most and CSS, being such a prolific artist, has the creative mind frame always been very different from uh, uh, each project, or is there a method behind the madness that just applies to everything you create?
Well, I've always been a bass player, so I always kind of knew my place in a band. But my approach to playing bass uh, has been very, very different in various bands. With the International Noise Conspiracy, it was a lot of like kind of groove rock with a lot of bass lines and bass runs, and that was really like I tried to play like a mix of Geezer Butler and Rick James almost. That was like my main influences in that band. Against Me is much more linear when you follow the root notes of the guitar chords and all that. CSS, they had all their songs like already written, and they had more of a kind of dance music meets like a Latin vibe or whatever you want to call that. The Most, we try to do a very, very retro 60s sound with influences from that. And I just basically I listen to so much music, man. I'm such a music fan, and I try to stay open. I try to like be humble and always learn new things and always learn a new or like learn something and then try to replicate it, but I can't really, so it turns out to be my thing. And so it's always been a creative journey of trying to just challenge myself as a musician and songwriter, I guess, but in with different people, different bands, different styles of music.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the whole bass player, so you know your place thing. I thought that was pretty funny. But and like I'm sure in the world of rock and roll, we've all heard our fair share of terrible bass player jokes and memes and all that. But bass is such an important instrument where,
Yeah.
yeah, oh, yeah, but bass is such an important instrument where it has both an emphasis on rhythm and melody in a way. Have you always preferred to have music before you knew what you were writing bass wise, or have you ever had a whole bass pattern that maybe the band could write according to?
Yeah, Noise Conspiracy did that a lot. Like we could come up with like a, a loop, like a loop of a bass line and a drum beat. Like we wrote songs in very different ways, but sometimes we started like that, then some guitar chords on top, and then it started singing, and then we developed from there. So yeah, we've done that for sure. But with Gatuplan, I'm writing with my acoustic guitar, my ukulele, and I write vocal melodies, and then I add the bass later on. So it's always uh there's many ways of writing music and approaching songwriting. uh, but I think that what to go back to your previous question about if there's always been a method to the madness, and that's been for me that punk rock has. I've learned from punk rock that uh, I might not be like the best bass player in the world or the best songwriter in the world, or I might not have the best equipment in the world or whatever, but I'm always trying my best with the means that are provided. That's always been a starting point for whatever I've been doing with music.
Well, does in order to get that inspiration, that creative drive, do ideas just strike out of the blue in a way, or do you have like a usual place that you go to in order to collect ideas?
No, that can happen. Inspiration comes in so many ways. Like with Gatuplan, when I because I'm writing the songs from scratch here, I try to sort of visualize my goal. Like, what kind of song do I want to write? What kind of lyrics? What kind of like mood should the song have? So I try to visualize that first and then write the song. And in some other occasions, it's just been sort of um, the spurt of the moment. Like I come up with a melody in my head or a bass line in my head, or I'm just, playing bass at home and something just like, oh, that sounded cool. And I try to just like, remember what I did, and then I can show it to my band and see what they think. And so it's all about what kind of situation I'm in creatively and what kind of musical collaboration I'm in. So yeah, it's not really. Um, I don't have a standard process of, of in writing, but I don't believe I'm one of those musicians that I don't believe in inspiration, really. I think that's kind of an amateurish thing, like to believe in inspiration. If yeah, like if you just commit the time to do music, to practice, to write songs, that's when it will happen. You have to put in the time to do it. Like you have to be like you have to commit to it because then it will happen. There's no magic. Like if you go into the studio and you're prepared, yeah, it will sound better than if you come into the studio and you're not prepared. There's a lot of stuff you can do in computers and software and all that, but that sort of craftsmanship or whatever you want to call it, it just takes time and it takes commitment.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would like to say that I've tried my best.
Well, it's so cool to hear you say that because, punk rock has a sound, obviously, which we can get into later. But I think punk rock is also just the way that you write a song, too. It has to come in a very organic nature. It's not like you could, it's not, and not to say that it's a bad thing when other bands do it, but like, I feel like punk rock music is not a very studio driven genre where, there's so much forethought and computerized and, being in the right studio. It just seems like you have to go right into it.
Yeah, for sure. But also punk rock demands that, like, because it's such an extrovert sound and loud music, that demands that you're very together as a band and that you communicate musically, and that you know what you're going to do, because in order to make punk rock sound good, you have to be sort of on time and on point, and everybody has to sort of uh chip in with whatever they can, uh if you know what I mean. It's one of those situations where people kind of, it's being dismissed as this like very simple like music to play, but if you listen to some bands, if you listen to like Rancid or Ramones or Discharge or I was just dropping some names here, but those guys can play. They can really play.
Yeah. But
And it's also a live form of music. It's a live situation where you gotta know what you're doing, you know?
Well, definitely. And it's funny to hear you say that because the term punk has also like really broadened over the years. Like, mentioning that I was born in 93 again, like,
Yeah.
my idea of punk rock, and I'm going to get so much shit on YouTube for this, but I don't care. But like my idea for punk rock is, bands like Sum 41. Blink 182, you know, like that
Okay.
sort of style
Yeah.
of punk rock. And, you know, and even My Chemical Romance, I would go in that regards. But they sound
Yeah.
nothing like the Sex Pistols or Black Flag or the Ramones or Rancid. So I feel like punk rock is almost as much of a verb and an adjective as it is a noun in that regards. Like, what would you say? Is there a specific element sonically that all punk rock bands have to have in order for it to be classified as punk? I've heard people call Metallica punk at times too. So,
Well, no, not at all.
yeah,
Punk isn't, to me, it's just an attitude and a way of approaching music and approaching life. Like if you go back, I mean, it's so interesting to talk to you because you got that perspective that, you know, your old school music is Sam 41. And by the way, I'm very sorry they broke up the
yeah,
other day. So
yeah, yeah,
that's right.
yeah,
I'm right, right? Yeah,
yeah,
I think I read something about that.
yep,
And when those bands became big bands, I was well sort of into my journey as a punk rock musician. So I felt that's music for younger people. That's not for me, you know. I can respect what you're doing, but it's not music that's written for me or where I am in life. But I also feel that there's nothing, um, that's just the way it should be. And I actually, at the time, as I said, I was like, oh, no, you know, this is not for me. This is not music that's written for my generation or my mindset or whatever. But I went to see My Chemical Romance last summer. I was blown away by their musicianship. Like they were so good at like playing and writing songs, and now I could hear influences in their music that I haven't heard before. Like I could hear there's some Queen in there, and some of those riffs are like a bit like T Rex or something like that. So uh, it all comes back to you in that way, and I think that's just so cool. You know that I at the age of like 45 could for the first time in my life perhaps like really relate to enjoy My Chemical Romance.
yeah.
And probably, you know, like the music you grew up on, like Sum 41 and Blink and all that, can open up the doors to their influences and whatever made them play music. So um, I guess we're all uh, part of the same family tree of music in one way or the other. We just got just sort of dropped into it at different uh, points in the timeline of this style.
But also with Gatuplan, the music is so technically impressive too. Like you mentioned, like the Motorhead influences in there. But it almost seems like Gatuplan is like a punk rock smorgasbord in a way. It has, you know, some old school elements. I think, yeah, I think people who discovered you through, you know, bands like Against Me, for example, I think are also going to just relate to it by that association and whatnot. So like, it almost seems like the music is very technically impressive in a way. And so is it fair to say with having the different influences in Gatuplan, it is fairly easy to sort of like experiment within punk rock as well? Are you able to sort of like it's not really too much of an obstacle to try new things?
No, it's not, you know. And once again, I'm relating to the history of punk rock because when punk rock started, you know, it was everything from like, you know, Ramones being like this band influenced by 50s doo-wop music and Phil Spector and all that, and then you had a bit more of like the bluesy thing with maybe Johnny Thunders and Heartbreakers, and then you had you know the whole Midwest scene, MC5 and the Stooges, inspired by like the sort of working class brutality or whatever you want to call, like blue color music. And you had some really really artsy stuff like, you know, later on like Suicide and bands like that. And then you had a hardcore wave that stripped everything down, and then post-punk and gothic music. Like, punk rock has always been a very broad umbrella with a lot of room for everyone under it, and all kinds of expressions, and all kinds of, as I say, like, it's more about an attitude or several attitudes than a style of music. And with Gatuplan, yes, I want to experiment. I want to try to sort of uh, see where things go musically. But I'm also very lucky that I'm playing with amazing musicians. Like, most of them are younger than me, but they play circles around me. I'm like, okay, like, you guys, you know what you're doing. Like, it's a very humbling experience, and I love that. So I give them a lot of room musically to do their thing and to contribute to the songs, even though I write the vocal melodies and the chord structures, and maybe the general feel of the songs. But uh, with their musicianship and their sort of open mind towards uh, different musical styles and all that, it really helps. Like, that makes the music just that much better, in my opinion.
And the final question I wanted to ask you is sort of regarding to that as well, because punk rock is always jam and it's quick and to the point. How do you know when you are finished with a song?
Oh, you don't, because, like, all of a sudden, like, okay, I write all these songs, right? And we go into the studio, we record, and we mix, and I send it to the label, and they make a record, and then it comes out, and then uh, I'm listening to it, and I'm like, always, and this has been the case. I've recorded maybe 20 albums in my life, something like that. Every damn time, it's the same thing. I get it. I'm like, oh, I could have played that better, huh? I could have done that better. That part, not so good. What was I thinking? So I don't know. I want, I want to leave that to the listener. If it's good enough, then okay. But I'm very, very, I'm kind of hard on myself when it comes to my own judgment on what I'm doing as a musician. But that keeps me in a forward motion, that I always want to be in new bands, and I want to play music with different people and make different styles of music, and make more records and tour more and all that. Uh, that so it's two sides of that coin, I would say.
Fair enough. That was a very good and technical answer, I must say. I appreciate the I appreciate to get that as the typical you just have to abandon answer. I've gotten that too many times.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I didn't try to to sort of. I didn't try to not answer your question, but it's such a hard question to answer, and I'm very critical of my own playing and of my own songwriting, so I become like uh, a bit self-conscious, I suppose. But I I also think that once a song is released and an album is released, it doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to the people who are enjoying it, buying it, listening to it, streaming it, or whatever. It's their music now,
Yeah.
and I have to move on. They have to, yeah, because both you and I, when we grew up, and we got into our favorite songs and favorite bands and all that, it really felt like they were music for you, and they made music for me, and they made music that made sense to our lives. So it became our music in that sense,
Definitely.
and our songs.
Definitely. So before we
Yeah.
go, I want to thank you so much for your time today and for
Mm-hmm.
such an awesome conversation. And most of all, thank you for this amazing new album. Just with the release of, let's see if I could do it again, Välkommen till underjord. Is there anything else you would like to promote?
Yes, you did it.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah, that's great. Välkommen to underjorden. Welcome to the underground. That's translated. And I don't know. What I would like to say is that we all been through hard times, and we all been through kind of a crazy time in the world with like especially COVID and how that hit the US really hard. And I know that because I was living in the US before that happened, and I've got so many friends over there, and I'm very very in tune with what's going on, and it was tough over here as well. We all got very isolated, and we all got very like a lot of us lost their jobs or a friend or a family member. And I feel like we're in this state now where when we're kind of rebuilding a community, we're rebuilding social connections, and we're rebuilding human relations and all that. And it's very easy to feel like I'm the weirdo, I'm an outcast, I'm a loner, I'm an outsider. Whatever makes sense to me might not make sense to the majority of society or whatever. Or uh, it's very easy to feel out of place. And I hope that my music and Gatuplan's music will project a feeling of that you're totally okay when you're not fitting in. You're totally okay being into stuff that other people don't get. You're totally okay. Like you're not alone. Like we're this big community of people who don't fit in, and we fit in perfectly with each other. And music brings people together, and hopefully my music is uplifting enough to get someone through a bad day.
It definitely has that aspect, and I appreciate you telling the listeners on the show that it's definitely something we need to hear at this time. Thank you so much, Inge. Everybody, we are here with Inge of Gatuplan. Welcome to the underground. Be sure to pick that up. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time. That was perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, that was a really
Thank you so
fun
much. It
interview.
was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And it was fine. I could crop out the internet issue
Likewise, the
before.
pleasure is all mine.
Yep. And I could crop out the internet issues too. So